Yo, this is me, Mike, Ringmaster of the Imagination Circus, and I'd like to welcome you to the circus. And today we're going to be reviewing another chapter of One Piece, and this is chapter 1027. Title, and let's see what we have. Yes. We have, of course, what I'm going to be focusing on first, because I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to go over every little detail like I have a poor, unfortunate tendency to do. But we have the cover here with Roger being Roger as we've come to know him fairly recently, because let's be honest, when we all started getting into One Piece, could any of us imagine one Gold Roger, as we might have known him then, and even as Gold D Roger when we first heard that name, doing this? Because I don't think I could. It makes so much sense in hindsight, especially considering how similar he is to Luffy, but regardless. Also, I'd like to point out the tiny detail of little guy Shanks and little guy Buggy just hanging off of a tree in the background. That is brilliant and such an Oda touch. But anyway, on to the actual story proper. We get a brief panel here of Nekomamushi covering his eyes to keep himself from being in Sulong. He's hugged by Carrot, no doubt happy to see him okay, but also because obviously he just took down Pero Sparrow. And of course, they're wondering how the hell that the clouds parted and, released the full moon, which is necessary for the Sulong transformation. Then, of course, we get back to the Skull Dome, where the fight between Luffy and Kaido is raring to continue, more or less. Where Yamato mentions, and I believe possibly, considering we also see Momo looking at the sky as well, I think, and he also read the diary and the journal, whatever you want to call it. I suspect that he is also the one referencing this, because they're both looking directly at the sky, and is they're making the comparison between Roger and Whitebeard specifically. Makes sense. That's the example they have best in mind, and that comparison stands. And it shows, and is obviously just another way for Oda to emphasize how far Luffy has come in learning how to properly use Haki to combat stronger opponents, and how much solidifying his place as a Yonko, which I've accepted him as the 5th Yonko ever since Big News Morgans released that statement, because let's look at all of Luffy's accomplishments, because he's had a lot of accomplishments. He's caused untold chaos throughout the world. He has a grand fleet of other pirates that's now, essentially, are at his beck and call, should he ever ask. Not that he's likely to, but still. He's invaded all 3 of the primary government facilities, and has punched out a world noble. Luffy's rap sheet speaks for itself. Regardless, Luffy has come a long way, and this shows it even more, just this emphasis from Momo and Yamato looking up at the sky and, thinking about what the journal said about that comparison between Roger and Whitebeard. Although, obviously, the relationship between Luffy and Kaido is a little bit more antagonistic than Whitebeard and Roger's was, at least based on what we saw of them. But regardless, let's go back. Go forward. I said go back, whatever. Point is, let's continue. And Yama Bro is said once again. Frankly, I don't care what any other translation says. I've accepted this as Yamato's nickname. I know I made a big deal of this a little while ago, but I love this, and I love it. And Luffy says it more than once here, which is great. And, of course, Yamato himself even brings up how, apparently she does not feel like she could properly handle the Thunder Bagua, which or like the 8 trigrams, whatever you want to call this move from Kaido, his like signature move, because it's because we saw Luffy get absolutely demolished by that at the end of the first act of Wano, and Luffy's come a long way where he can at least counter it a little bit, whereas Yamato feels absolutely inadequate, even though she is technically still standing, but is otherwise bleeding from the head. It's not too bad, honestly. But there's nothing more. There, as annoying as it can be, there is few things as compelling as a character that doesn't feel up to snuff. A character that doesn't quite believe in themselves, because you automatically want to root for them at that point. It's almost annoying because I wish they were more confident, but I also don't know if I would like them as much otherwise. Regardless, also, Luffy calls out, the reason, like I said, refers to her as Yamabro, and Luffy calls out to her because apparently Momo is still taking his sweet-ass time, and Luffy is being impatient and irritable about it, while Momo is like, hey, give me some time, I gotta change myself, this is not as easy as it looks. But, Luffy just isn't having that, and I kind of have to side with Luffy. Part of it is probably a little bit of bias on my part. I think I've emphasized how big a fan of Luffy I am. Maybe a little bit too much. My point still stands that when it comes to this situation, Momo really does kind of have to get his ass in gear, because we are in a desperate situation and he needs to act. If he does not act, everything is going to end badly, and as emphasized later in this very issue, Onigashima is going to fall on the flower capital. So yeah, they got work to do. So yeah, Luffy automatically, tells Yamato to, go help Momo, because he obviously needs the encouragement. And so there's that. And then we get a little bit that makes me feel like, I wrote this down as is, Yamato already feels like a crew member, which I gotta say, I won't say I haven't been enthusiastic about Yamato as a crew member, more that I just haven't been feeling like it was going to be a thing, because Luffy obviously never confirmed that was going to be a thing, but he is treating her like an ally. That is good. That is very good. However, the fact of the matter is that, otherwise we still haven't seen any encouragement. But then what happens here is essentially she hops onto Momo, to give him encouragement and to apologize that they got separated earlier, which is very Yamato in my opinion. Kaido, being freaking Kaido, it just goes in hard with his club, asking, where the hell do you think you two are going? He is not having any of it. So he comes in, and Yamato manages to barely block the attack, at least that's how it looks to me. But Luffy comes in and wraps his legs around Kaido and is and then Luffy says Yamabro again, and Yamato immediately knows what the heck he's going on about, which again, like I said, makes it feel like she's already a crew member, even though nothing's been confirmed yet. And like I said, I wasn't against it, I just didn't feel like it was actually going to happen up until this point, because this feels, not necessarily like confirmation, but at least makes it feel more like she's on her way. But regardless, apparently, she knows immediately, you want him all to yourself, and Luffy just goes, yup, and makes the biggest fracking grin, even for him, it's just such an overwhelming little devil smile of his. And then, Yamato then goes off of the Skull Dome with Momo, leaving Luffy to face Kaido. And of course, Momo is still learning this whole dragon thing, but Yamato at least has a little bit more knowledge, being Kaido's child and all. And as such, she instructs him that dragons, quote, do not actually fly. They glide or skip or whatever through the sky via creation of clouds that gives them footholds, which is cool. It also speaks to how fast dragons actually are if they can do that and it looks like flying from a distance. But anyway, Momo manages to pull this off, and that's good, but they're of course in sight of the flower capital, and they have a little bit of a back and forth. Especially once they see that Kaido's clouds are weakening, because the bedrock beneath Onigashima is crumbling and it's coming apart, which indicates the thing is, we have yet to see Kaido come off like he's actually hurt all that much. Obviously, he's been fighting all night, essentially. He's been attacked by the Scabbards, obviously, by Yamato, and of course by Luffy, Kid, Zoro, to a certain... all these characters have attacked Kaido in one way or another. Like Law as well. And as such, he's been fighting all night long. So even though Kaido is, quote-unquote, the strongest creature in the world, he's not invincible. Nobody's invincible. He's not invincible, but he is tough. And this is the first real indicator of how, tired and how hurt he actually is. Because the clouds that he's using that have been carrying Onigashima this entire time are actually starting to weaken, and the bedrock beneath is starting to fall to the ground. And that's a clear indicator of how bad the state Kaido is actually in. And that's great, because it's a subtler way to show it. Instead of showing us on the surface that Kaido is weak, we find that his concentration has apparently just been pulled away. He can't focus as much as he should be able to on carrying Onigashima, because he keeps getting distracted by these fights and by, obviously, to a certain extent, his injuries, however minor they are. He has been injured a few times throughout the night. Then, of course, there is the rest of the argument between Momo and Yamato about this, and how, Momo, it's not entirely clear, but it's okay, 1 minute it feels like Momo saying that they need to stop Onigashima, but then, Yamato says that it's going to be difficult, but Momo can do it if he can make his own clouds and be the one to be strong enough to carry Onigashima going forward. Momo says that that's likely impossible because he's still got these doubts and lack of confidence despite everything that Luffy tried to teach him in the last few issues. What do you expect? He's a bit of a slow learner. That's fine. I'm also a slow learner.
I am a slow learner.
We're all slow learners. Well, maybe not all of us, but I think a decent amount of us are probably slow learners. Am I right? I feel like I'm right about that. Point is that Momo still needs a little bit of more of a confidence boost. And one of his initial ideas is that they should stop Luffy from actually fighting Kaido. And Yamato's response feels like such a Straw Hat move, or at least almost like a Luffy move, because she smacks him on the head with her kanabo, and of course, calling him a moron, which is great. It's a genuinely funny panel. I laughed a little bit earlier in the manga chapter, but this is genuinely one of the ones that really freaking got me, because it's such a fun bit, and because it shows Yamato's eccentricity, and it shows that she has complete faith in Luffy. He has put so much weight on his own shoulders. He's burdening it all by fighting Kaido, even though he's been beaten down so many times and he's weakened, and he needs to go in and win this. And so they have to have faith in him. And I like that. And so it's up to Momo and Momo alone to save Onigashima. And there's nothing, it's all up to them. They can't distract Luffy from his goal of beating Kaido, and there's really not much else to it. So there you go. Also, I want to bring this up. Apparently, at least according to Yamato in this chapter, apparently if Onigashima falls, there will be a massive explosion, which, correct me if I'm wrong, does that sound like something completely different from Kaido's intended goal? He wants to crush the flower capital, but he doesn't want to cause an explosion. So is it implying that in his intended goal, he would have dropped it in such a way that it would have crushed the flower capital without causing an explosion, dropping it slightly more softly, whereas the weight would, of course, crush everybody and everything in the capital without causing an explosion, and therefore that's what Yamato meant? Or is it implying that Kaido didn't think this through, and whatever he does, there's going to be an explosion that will destroy everything within miles of the epicenter of the explosion? Is that what's going on? Because I'm not sure. That the latter is what I initially thought, but thinking about it, I think that the former is actually what Oda's was implying when he wrote this, but I can't be 100% sure. So anybody else wants to, please give me your thoughts, because I'm not 100% sure about that. So there's all of that going on. And so, really, like we said, it's up to them. So we move on a bit, and we find that ourselves back on the live floor, where King and Zoro are still fighting. King has turned his arms into wings, being that he can turn himself into a pteranodon or a pterosaur or something of that like. And he is able to apparently use his wings as blades, which is cool. I like that. That's a nice detail. He's going in and he's like just destroying everything, and it's cool. And it shows how strong both he and Zoro is in comparison to him, because Zoro is doing okay. He's still standing, especially considering after how badly injured Zoro was before, and he's only really standing because of the miracle drug from the minx, which itself is like, obviously probably going to wear off once the battle is over. And Zoro's already looking like he got injured again during this fight. So honestly, Zoro, this might be worse than when nothing happened. Like, you know what I mean? I think you guys know what I mean. Like, this feels like Zoro might actually be in the worst shape of his life. He's going to be very injured once this is over, and it's probably the worst we're going to ever see him. Or at least I feel like it should be. Like, maybe on par with what happened to Luffy at Marineford, especially like because like Luffy was constantly taking the hormones to make himself feel better, and comparing the hormones thing to the miracle drug from the minx feels very on point to me. So I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but that's my thoughts on it at least. So of course Zoro is very, very injured, or at least he comes off that way, and he gets knocked away, and we get a little bit of an interaction. We get a little bit of an interaction between King and Queen, where it very much reminds me that King and Queen are essentially the worst versions of Zoro and Sanji. Not so much in that they are worse as characters, but in that they are like genuinely hate each other. Unlike Zoro and Sanji, who just can't stand the other. I mean, I know that's such a, I don't know, a minute, such an arbitrary comparison, but I do feel like that because, I don't know, something about this panel just immediately reminded me of when Zoro and Sanji bicker. But like I said, I get the impression that these two really do want to kill each other, especially when it comes to King wanting to kill Queen. But regardless, King goes after Sanji. I mean, Zoro. Slip up there, sorry. But Zoro gets knocked away, and he gets knocked into Frankie. And Frankie, of course, being a good crewmate and friend, actually asks if he needs any help. But, Zoro, he's huffing and he's puffing, but he's actually going in. He's going to go in hard. Also, apparently, Zoro managed to crack King's mask, which is apparently a big freaking deal and something that King takes really personally, which makes me really freaking wonder what's the deal with this, because he's been wearing this mask or a variation of it for at least 20 or 40 years, because like we see in the flashback, he was used to wear, like at least based on the colorized version from say I think the anime, he used to wear red. Now he's in black, but it's like, okay, well, why does he wear this mask? What's the big deal? And even at the end of the chapter, they like highlight the idea that King's mask being broken is a big deal. What does his face actually look like? And in the colorized scan I saw, which was of course a fan-made scan of the chapter, they gave him like a sort of dark skin and a platinum blonde hair at the final panel when we most clearly see the damage done to his mask. And I like that idea, but it raises a serious question. Like, granted, because what is... Like, obviously, we've slowly gotten this idea about what the heck, King's race is. Like, the idea that maybe he's from the moon, he's this race that can control fire naturally for some reason. But it's like, we really don't know that much, and so I really am curious about what he looks like, if he looks that different from a human, or if he will mostly look human when we finally see his real form. Because with what we've seen so far, it's like, there's a little bit of skin and a little bit of a tuft of hair, and that's it. And we don't really have anything beyond that. So who knows? Like, who really knows at this point what the guy actually looks like? But regardless, the battle continues, and Zoro is of course hit again. He goes in with this dope technique, and I definitely think obviously I think it definitely affected King, but Zoro got hit a little bit harder, and he's once again knocked back. This time so far out that he almost falls off Onigashima like Luffy did. But Zoro's able to use another technique to send himself flying back up so that he can continue to fight King. And apparently Zoro is very much insulted that King didn't use an actual blade to attack him. He's just using his wings right now. And he considers that unforgivable. Meanwhile, King also says the same to him. And I have to assume he's referring to breaking his mask, because that's apparently a big freaking deal for him, and according to the crowd, from everybody else. So it's it really makes me wonder why he wears the mask in the first place, and why it's such a big deal that it's being broken. Because so far it doesn't seem like what he looks like under the mask looks like a big, that weird or different. So I'm really curious about that. But otherwise, either way, I will say Zoro looks like he's struggling a little bit. Certainly in the way that Luffy was initially struggling against Kaido. So I have to assume Zoro will, of course, find his resolve and, come through on top. But, of course, obviously, like I said, I also think Zoro's going to come out of this looking way worse than when nothing happened. So that's my thoughts on this. I can't honestly say anything beyond this, because I don't feel like this was a good chapter. Again, I rarely see a chapter of One Piece where I'm not enjoying myself in some way, and there were definitely some good moments, some funny moments, some action-packed moments, but this was very much a chapter meant to just move the story along, so it wasn't really the strongest chapter, and of the chapters I've reviewed so far, I think this is by far the weakest. It's good, and I enjoyed it, but I don't think there was any really big hype moments. Last week at least had the cloud splitting thing, not to mention the major defeats of Pero, Sparrow, and Jack. That chapter, I do think that chapter was a little bit more solid, it had a little bit more meat to it. This chapter is good, it's just a little bit weaker, and I would give this one overall a 7.6 out of 10. It's good, but it could be better. That's all I'm saying. It was a fun chapter, it was a transitionary chapter, it was an information chapter, very much a, hey, this is what's coming up kind of chapter, but otherwise, that was all it was. It wasn't bad, it was just good. Which, for One Piece, is still way above an average chapter or episode of anything else. But anyway, I think that that's pretty much everything I have to say. So this is Mike, Ringmaster of the Imagination Circus, and if you feel so inclined, please do visit me again in the future for more reviews, analysis, discussions like this. And if you feel, may I wish you, with all of my good intentions and all of my sincerity, please have a good day. Thank you.
So does anybody else feel like I was a little bit low energy this time around? Because I feel like I was. I don't know. I was a little bit disappointed, but I don't feel like I could have gotten much more out of it. I hope you enjoyed regardless. Thank you for watching.